All righty. So skipping the first, we obviously starting with the second week, but that's because the first one is just syllabus and all that stuff. So what I want to do tonight, like I said, is just do a quick walkthrough through some of the more relevant aspects of the Fusion the Fusion interface, and then we will more individually discuss some of the tools as it relates to the actual first assignment. So let me change over to Fusion. Yep, boppity boop. And if you haven't already, I think I gotten from everybody, but if you haven't already, make sure to send me your email me the email you used to sign up for your Autodesk account so I can add you to our shared team. Our shared team. Because one of the main things is remember that Fusion saves everything online. So while you can access Fusion or you can have Fusion installed on any computer, your account is online, cloud storage. So the benefit of that is you can access your files anywhere that already has a computer or a computer that already has Fusion installed and not have to find like a flash drive and carry that around with you, nor do you have to keep that flash drive updated with the most current version. But you have to have the internet to actually access that. So, pros and cons. The other thing is you can have your own personal account, which it probably asked you to do when we first set up Fusion. When you accept the team invite, in the upper left-hand corner, the data panel, this little matrix symbol, little 9 squares there, it will bring up the data panel. In the upper left-hand, this little drop-down, you will have, once you accept, either your own personal team and then the accepting shared team, which is BSU, 3DM, 3D modeling, all that such. I will be populating this area with assignment folders. Each of your projects will go into the appropriate folder. That's how you will be turning in assignments. Now, if you started projects on your own team, unfortunately, Fusion has still not introduced a way to directly transfer between teams. I don't know why, but it is what it is. So I'll show you how to transfer stuff from your own personal account to our shared account. But either way, you'll be plopping stuff into our shared folder and such, and I'll be showing you the examples and stuff here in a few. But that's how we get to stuff. And you can most certainly upload files that way too, and I'll show you how to do that in a few. But that's how you access your files and such. We can close that. You can see the screen opens and closes a little bit. The main thing with Fusion, the interface, is it tries to be intuitive. Unlike other CAD programs or like things like Photoshop, stuff like that, the whole surrounding interface is populated with all the different tools you could use. They try to minimize that. Problem with that is it also kind of gets confusing as, wait, where are all of my tools? They're just not open right now. That's all. That's the main thing. Anything you mouse over will have a pop-up, and it will give you a definition, explain what that tool does, and give you a little virtual thing, as well as it says you have a hotkey for expanding to get more help. So any tool here, you can very quickly get a reference for and see what that actually does. So more information, always good. For the most part, this class, we're going to be working in the design environment. Click this, and you have a whole bunch of different options. Most of this we were just not going to get to. There's just not time in this course, both like per class and time and the overall coverage of the course. But what this is there's different aspects like generative design I was just talking about in the lecture. AI assisted generating an object to use the least amount of material from between designated points, whatever. So like here it's a caster wheel, or you could say like it's a shelf, instead of like, oh yeah, I need a shelf bracket that's like it so and so, but it needs to have something connected between so it's strong as it can be. Well, instead of just building it directly, what generative design can do is decide that, okay, well, there's going to be some stresses here, it needs to connect to the wall here and here, that sort of thing. So it could develop some kind of network webbing, yada, 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 and technically minimize the amount of material it would use. They do actually come out looking really neat. Anyway, the other aspect is rendering. So you can apply material appearances within this. So you model a hand plane and you want it to look like the handles are actually made of cherry and the base is cast out of metal and polished and stuff like that. You can get an approximate look of it in the design environment, but rendering will actually generate a highly detailed, highly rendered picture of your object. That's what rendering is. The rest of the stuff is like animation, like you've got actual mechanical parts. You can see how you can make an exploded view, so they all like all the little screws and parts come apart. You can see how everything moves together, that sort of thing. The other ones, simulation and put stress factors. These are engineering things. Manufacturing, you can directly go from Fusion to controlling actual CNC equipment. So like machining out of like a lathe, a mill, actual stuff that will take a block of metal and reduce it down to the actual part. Drawing creates two-dimensional drawings. So you would give the drawings from like your virtual thing, and you can give it to like a machinist or tool maker or something like that, and they can actually manufacture the thing. It's just manufacturing stuff. You can actually design electronics in Fusion as well. So if you are in the know for actually making your own circuit boards and such, you can totally design them here and then send them to a company to actually have them manufactured. No, neat stuff. There's a bunch of different other stuff, but that's the main things. Just know that we're basically making you working with a design environment. Now, the top tools here, solid, surface, mesh, sheet metal, yada, 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 we're not going to get to work with a lot of those either. We will try to introduce like surface. We'll definitely touch on meshes. Fusion is not great with meshes. If you're unfamiliar with meshes, it's just a different way of describing a three-dimensional object. But most of the stuff you would like download from a file sharing website like Thingiverse or Cult 3D, any of that kind of stuff, are going to be defined as a mesh, and Fusion does not like them. It like really can quickly crash your program. So yeah, I'd stick with like creating stuff in solids. We'll get to that stuff. Within all of this, we'll be creating sketches, which are drawings, two-dimensional drawings that we'll then manipulate, bring it three-dimensional. Uh, First tool we'll be using really is extrude to create the badges we're going to be working with first. Revolve is going to be the next project, which is taking that profile and spinning it around instead and making a round object. Hole is a good tool, but I don't really like using it as much. But basically, it's just creating a hole that you could like add threads to. So if you wanted to like have it where it screws down to something, that's what that's for. Depending on the other tools and depending on your interface, will show or it will that all will depend on what you see. Both like if you have a smaller screen, it's not going to show as many tools. The drop down here, create, is going to show all of the ones. You can add and subtract tools from the toolbar from directly. If you mouse over a tool on the drop down, say like revolve, you see these little ellipses, these three dots. Left click on that, and you can select, put it to pin to the toolbar, add the shortcuts, that sort of thing. Shortcuts, we're going to go over hotkeys here in a few minutes, but if you press S at search, you can find it there. Automate, we're not going to use at all. Modify, we're going to use a lot of these, but basically just different tools like fillet and chamfer. These are things you just kind of either round off or trim off corners and such. There's a bunch of different stuff in here we're going to go over, but these are modifiers to your objects. Assemble comes in when we're making multiple different components, making different parts, ideally, and later on we're going to make things move, stuff like that. And then the other ones, some of these aren't really as relatable for what we're going to be doing. We're talking about construction planes. You got inspection stuff, so you can like measure stuff in here, as well as bring in objects or images. That's pretty much it. And I know those of y'all actually watching on the screen, you're seeing all the zoom tools that get in the way. So let me move this around. Like I said, if you don't, I highly recommend getting a mouse. You can get just a simple 2-3 button travel mouse. That's all you need. But working off of a touchpad gets real tedious, mainly because down at the bottom middle, you can see all the different ways. These are all modifiers for how you're viewing your objects and such. So you have orbit, click that, and you have the little symbol for moving around and around. Click and hold, click and drag, and you can see how you orbit around. Hit escape to get out of the tool. Look at, you have to have an object to look at it first. The little hand symbol, pan, left, right, up, down. Orbit, rotate, pan, just sliding it around on your screen. But If you have a mouse, press and hold the wheel button or the wheel, and you can pan. Press shift on your keyboard and then press the mouse key or the wheel, and you can orbit. So it makes it a lot easier. The other tools are zoom and just fit fit to the screen. So if you're like working on something, it just resizes whatever you got. The other ones are just display settings. Things like, excuse me, like your visual style. Right now, these won't make sense, but you could have shaded, fully shaded. You can see through wire form, stuff like that. Environment just changes the look of the screen. That's all. Effects, those are like shadows and such. If you're really getting into rendering, visibilities, we'll talk about that stuff later. But really, most of the stuff isn't really relevant. Main things, just the first two, visual style and environment. These are totally just different ways of looking at the object. I'm going to go back to the original setting. It's a little bit easier for y'all to see on a projector screen. That's all. The last button on here, viewports. You can just press Shift 1. I don't know why it says exclamation point, but Shift I. That goes from the single perspective view, so you can move everything around, to, if you've worked with any kind of CAD software before, you're probably more familiar with the 4-view version. So you can look at the top, the side, and or top, front, and side view, as well as perspective. So you can toggle between those. Shift 1. There you go. The one other thing I want to show you on this for how to view stuff is in the upper right hand corner of your general screen is this view cube. This shows you relation to what you're looking at. Let me throw down like a box real quick, just so you can have a little bit of a reference object. So you can click and drag on this view cube, or you can click on the surface itself, and that'll show you the top. Or you can click and drag it, orbit, move it around, that sort. I will often refer to the home button. When you mouse over it, you will see this little home symbol. That brings it back to standard 3/4 perspective view. You can also click on the sides and such of that view cube, so you can get partial views. If you're looking directly at the top, bottom side, whatever, these little arrows will show up, and you can rotate it. Like I said, Fusion likes to hide things that you don't necessarily need. That doesn't show up unless you are looking directly at the top or side view or something like that. That's pretty much how that works. Down here, or sorry, down on the left-hand side that's where this will expand as we work, and you will see the different things that show up. What I mean by that is the hierarchy of this overall thing called the project tree. We talked about this a little bit last class. The very top is going to be your main project. Right now, it just says untitled. You should always label what you are working on, or sorry, not where. You should always save immediately, because Fusion will autosave, but only after you have started this project save. So it would be, go up, either just hit the save symbol, press Control S, or if you're on Mac, Command S, same diff, start that way. So we would say your last name, so me, Collins, and then just intro. Now every time I save, make a change, it'll automatically save. Below that, you have document settings. We are going to be standard using millimeters because it directly translates to the 3D printers. But you can change that just by clicking on there, and then you have the drop down for like centimeters, meters, inch, foot. You get the idea. Next, you can name the views. That's not really necessary, but you know, top, front, right, you get the idea there. Origin is your different planes. This we will discuss here in a minute, but this is just basically the smack middle of the virtual workspace. If you're thinking of it in terms of you're working on a page, there's a smack in the middle of the page, that kind of thing. Below that will be populated with bodies. When we start with sketches, will be sketches, all that kind of stuff. Everything will expand down that list. You can also isolate things. So like your project come down, we will add components. Components can have sketches, bodies, all that kind of stuff. Everything will get built inside of that. The other thing is, let me just create like a hole here. Sure, fine, whatever, doesn't matter. At the very bottom is a history slider. It will save progressively, linearly, the history of what you are doing, usually. What I say by that is some components, some elements of this, like in sketching, it will not save point to point. But when you're making major changes to objects, it will save it because you can't really make saves to each little thing. You can always go like Control Z, Control Y, or on Mac, Command Z, Command Y to go back and forth, but otherwise it saves it that way. You can go back and forth in time on that too. Pretty neat. And you can always add something in between if you need. So that's pretty much the quick rundown. Obviously, we're going to go into more detail on all this stuff, but as we go along, we're going to be building on more tools. So try to keep up with that kind of stuff. Let me pause the share there, and you can find the explanation stuffs, like a quick reference guide. The very first one, or sorry, the third option down on Blackboard. Let me just open up the page here. There is a intro Fusion glossary. There's a whole bunch of terms here, a lot of stuff we've already talked about, all that sort. But it will also have explanations for different tools. I've tried to highlight in blue what are also actual commands. So stuff like zoom, pan, rotate, tumble, orbit, those are all kind of the same term. That sort of thing. As it says, terms are in black, commands are in blue. I've just tried to make those actually there. Different things like chamfer, component, lines, all that sort of stuff. At the very bottom, there are hotkeys. So like pressing S brings up the toolbox, the search bar. Pressing when you're working in sketches, you instead of selecting circle, you can just press C and it'll bring up the circle tool. Or F and bring up filament. L will bring up line. You get the idea. So there's a bunch of little stuff like that. We'll talk about it in more detail, but that's pretty much the rundown. Just wanted to show you some of the basics, describe some of the basics. Let's get on to the full thing.